Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast here. Nick and Lucas joining you as always, and today we're pleased to be joined by Cameron, the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Cameron, really appreciate your time today here. How's the season going so far?
Things are going great. Could always use a few more wins, but teams have been competitive and crowds have been good, and so we're excited to see what the rest of the season has in store for us.
Absolutely. The East is tight this year, but Columbus has been super fun to watch. Want to get into your role here right away, Cameron. What is the day to day like? What are your kind of core responsibilities there as Chief Operating Officer of the Blue Jackets?
Well, first and foremost, it's to raise revenue so we can continue to be competitive with the investment we make back into the product on the ice. So that's first and foremost. And so, in kind of with that in mind, it'd be anything that would really touch a customer in that way or the operation thereof. Uh, I work really closely with Nationwide Arena to make sure that our guests are having the best experience while they're here. Everything from food and beverage to retail, tickets, suites, sponsorships, all those types of things. A little bit of parking. We don't really control parking, but it does impact our customers. So we work through some of those things as well with our partners at Nationwide Realty, et cetera. So it's never a dull moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to dive a bit deeper into kind of your day to day, like, are you in office most days or are you traveling quite a bit for business? How much of your time maybe is spent meeting with staff on a daily, weekly basis?
Yeah, no, good questions. So I don't travel that much. I'll travel to select, we do some meetings. I'd say I probably travel about once. It averages about once every month, every other month. I'm sorry. But there'll be periods where I might go several months in a row and then go several months without. So we'll do things like league meetings are once a year. They're usually in July. We'll make that trip. Then I'll try to benchmark other arenas that I really want to see what they're doing or something specific. And then maybe take major partners to to the games away as well. So
Very cool, very cool. And I wanted to ask as well, Cameron, I know you mentioned kind of working with the arena on all logistics and operations there. How much does your role interact or cross over with the hockey operations side of things? I think, that's obviously what a lot of our listeners are most interested in is the hockey op side. But I think we try to shine a light on, hey, all these other elements and components of the business all kind of tie together.
well, before I answer that, I go back. I didn't answer the second part of your question, Lucas, which is about. So I have various department heads that I'll meet with on a one-on-one basis regularly. Then there'll be some cross-departmental meetings that I'll sit in on, and then a lot of other stuff is either opportunistic or problem solving. But I would say several hours a week are in those types of meetings for sure. Uh, but then going back into your question on the hockey ops, um, I work fairly closely with them. Everybody's style is a little different. So John Davidson and Jarmo Kekalainen, true gentlemen, good friends. Worked really closely with them as well as Bill Zito when Bill Zito was here. And then even going back prior to that, I worked with Scott Howson when Scott Howson was here. And some of it's driven by personality, and some of it's just driven about kind of what their background or interest is in. So I'd say Scott was more. I would go to him, and he would try to be helpful. Yarmo and John was a little bit of both. The great news in our office is the GM president of hockey's office is 2-3 doors down from mine. And we believe in that we're all one team, and so that part's great. We got Rick Nash down the hall. But Don Waddell, when he was in Carolina, he ran the business as well as the hockey in Carolina. And ironically enough, 30 years ago, one of my first jobs in sports, I worked for the DeVos family, and they owned the Orlando Magic, but also the Orlando Solar Bears. And Don, when I started, was the president of the Orlando Solar Bears.
Okay.
So we had a short tenure together way back when. I remember it way better than he does. But Don's in my office, or I'm in his every day, and we talk regularly. He wants to know how he can be helpful. He has real inquisitive questions about the business, just because I think it interests him. But he also enjoys meeting our partners, and he understands that if he wants to be able to write the checks to get the equipment and the payroll and everything he needs, we need to have a healthy business. And so he's truly invested, and he's a phenomenal asset. And with that, I think he's helping to kind of coach the rest of the organization on what, one, what he expects, and two, kind of what works. And, Rick's always been great, but Rick's been even more involved since Don's been here, Chris Clark, you name it, the guys make themselves available.
Yeah, and it's super interesting, like Nick touched on earlier, is like there's so many roles that work cross-functionally that I think a lot of people entering the industry don't realize. And in a lot of cases, there are roles where you can almost use that as a stepping stone to get to maybe where you want to be, right? So to go back to the start of your career, you kind of touched on it there briefly, but we always talk about getting your foot in the door. Did you have a specific role or a moment that you remember that was your initial foot in the door into the industry?
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I had a friend who got a job working at the ATP tennis tournament at Madison Square Gardens, and that little light bulb went off in my head, like, hey, that could be an opportunity. Like, I hadn't thought about it. I tried and tried, and it was NHL lockout, baseball strike, and there just wasn't anything. And so I was from a small town in Pennsylvania. My dad was an educator, and so I picked up everything and moved in with my aunt and uncle outside of DC, pretty far outside of DC, but it was outside of DC in rural Maryland. And so I just started interviewing for jobs. And at one point, I was a longer story, but I was in Landover interviewing for a job, and I heard an ad on the radio or the news talking about at that time it was the Washington Bullets, had signed Chris Webber and Juwan Howard, and the exit was right there. So I said, hey, why not? So I pulled off and pulled into this massive surface parking lot, pulled as close to the arena as it would let me get. And I walked up to the doors of the arena and knocked on the doors and basically was like, hey, what can I do? And they tried to get rid of me. The security guards were like, hey, scram. We're not, but eventually I got to meet with a woman. I spent the whole day there, and I went back that night to my uncle's house, who was letting me stay with him out of the goodness of his heart, feeding me and everything else. And he said, so how did the interview go? Meeting the other interview. And I said, well, actually, I got a job. I'm going to be working for the Bullets. And he's like, what, the Bullets? Like, how'd that happen? So then he eventually works his way into, what does that pay? And I said, nothing. And without blinking, he said, so what's your other job going to be? And so I said, yeah. Well, I end up waiting tables at Chili's restaurant. And then when the lockout ended, Abe Poland owned the Capitals as well. And we were very closely physically related, same building. And when that ended, the Caps came and said, hey, we'll pay you. Would you like to work for us? So I did that for the rest of that season, and I still worked Bullets game nights. And so it was a hard time. And then at the end of that season, they offered me a job selling tickets. And when I saw what they were going to pay me, I was like, man, I can't make this work. And so I threw everything in my car and moved to Florida with one of my best friends who was living in Orlando. And I said, well, that didn't work. I'm going to try just get a job. And so I spent about 3 months trying to find a job. And one of the first things that happened when I got there was my roommate had cut an article out of the paper back when you could do that. And it was this new sports marketing firm that had started there. And so I cold called this guy until he finally took the meeting, and he gave me an opportunity, and I was there for 2 years. And then that was a springboard into me meeting the folks from the Orlando Magic, Solar Bears, and then eventually Miracle. And so I ended up going there for 11 years.
That's awesome. I think there's so many important lessons in there, and like you said, not taking no for an answer. When security said, "Hey, buddy, get out of here," just looking to get that first opportunity into the door, and then once you're in there with the Bullets, other opportunities come knocking. Once people know your name, your face in the building there, and obviously cold calling too. I think that's a bit of a lost art with email, LinkedIn messages, or otherwise. But always love to hear that story. Just wanted to interject with that,
Yeah,
Lucas.
it's funny what desperation will do for you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. It might even take you to Chili's
yeah, well,
Exactly.
it took me a while to go back to eat there, because when you work in a place like that, it just
once you see how the sausage is made.
but it's actually, it's a great place. But I think one of the lessons for me that comes out of that, and one that I've got 4 kids and I try to pass on them, is you got to take personal responsibility for what you want to have happen in this life. That there's no, very rare that anything's given to you. You've got to figure out how to make it happen. And so I was in a position where I had not a lot of choices. I had to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great kind of lesson, especially to people kind of entering the industry, right? It's like you're not going to just be handed your dream role, and you might not get that for a while. You got to kind of work through the ranks. And I kind of want to touch on your role with the Orlando Magic. How did that experience prepare you for your current role of what you're doing now? And also, how are those skills that you gained transferable to the hockey industry?
Yeah. So I grew up on the corporate side of the business, so I worked a lot with the sponsorship group, and then the higher end premium tickets and things of that nature. And so one of the fascinating parts about that part of the business is you meet a lot of business leaders, and you get the opportunity to learn about their business and how they run their business, and like how they manage and the things like that. And so at an early age, even at the sports marketing firm, I met some pretty high level people, and you like become a sponge and try to borrow from that, and steal from that what you can to become your own, and kind of adapt it into what you think the situation arises. And so, I mean, I remember when I was in DC trying to find a job, and all these jobs had requirements listed, and one of them was Microsoft Excel. And you know, I went to Princeton, I had a liberal arts education, and we didn't have an Excel class, not when I was there, and I didn't know how to do it. So I bought a book called Excel for Dummies, and I taught myself Excel. And so you just, after a while, you just have to kind of figure out what you need to do. And I mean, to this day, I'll still have people sometimes come in and ask me to show them something. And I've not had an inch more training besides hunting and pecking on my own, and that dumb book that I think I still have somewhere.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think again, a lot of important lessons through that response there. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the corporate sponsorships and strategy side of things. I think your time in the NBA there, Cameron, was really a growth point for the league. You know, whether it was Kobe, LeBron, Shaq, really starting to get the NBA on the map after Jordan's kind of reign there. I feel like the NHL the last couple of years, it's really taken a new level with sponsorship, marketing, just global kind of presence for the game. Follow up on Lucas's question there, I guess, but how were you able to kind of take what you learned during your time in the NBA, how they hit their growth spurt on the corporate and sponsorship side of things, and build off of that with Columbus, the NHL, etc.
Yeah, a few thoughts on that. One is, there's a lot of similarity between basketball and hockey because it's an arena sport. And so the dynamics are very similar. I took a hiatus when I was here for 4 years. I worked in the college space and did a lot of college football, and that is different because your frequency of events is different, the size of the events, and the navigation on a game day is very different. So that was a good learning for me. But as far as the NBA, the NHL, and the NBA's always been, I think it started with David Stern, and believe that's where Gary Bettman came from. They've always wanted to push the envelope on kind of being first to market, to try things, and they've always had a lot of success with that. I mean, I think the things that don't work, they just don't do anymore, and they keep pushing and keep pushing, and that's continued on with Adam Silver. And what I've seen is that the NHL has tried to, I think, take a more strategic. No, I mean they're both strategic, right? But I think they've just been more deliberate in the decisions they've made on where they're going to put their investments and things. And the advent of HD TV and now 4K. I mean, yeah, it used to be harder to watch our game on TV, and now, I mean, it's fantastic. And I remember sitting in Detroit. We were at a president's meeting with Gary Bettman, and he was talking about the upcoming, negotiations with NBC, et cetera. And he had indicated like our game is fantastic. It's fast, it's physical, and people love watching it. It's got a defined time frame, so you don't have to worry about like, well, how long am I going to have to be attached to this? I want to see the outcome. So I think our game has gotten exponentially more popular and easy to consume because of all those things. It ends up in the deal with ESPN and TNT and all those pieces that has made our game fantastic. And the compete level of our guys, and they're humble, they're hardworking. I mean, you got guys who break a hand and go out the next night, or guy who tears an ACL and stays in the game and makes an assist,
Yeah.
who, before he goes out. So I mean, it's that culture. I think a lot of people relate to guys that are working hard, and that's not to say that one's better than the other, the NBA versus the NHL, but I do think that there's a lot of things that you can borrow off each other. But the NBA has always wanted to kind of take more risks and be out front. Maybe that's because they've had the bigger TV deal longer. I really can't speak to what that is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we obviously have all known that the game is so entertaining, and it's really, I guess, getting that in front of the eyes of more people who might not be aware of that, because you do see a lot of people watch hockey for the first time and be like, wow, this is like so fast paced, action packed, always stuff going on. I'd like to know, like, what do you think the NHL and hockey in general needs to do in order to continue to grow and expand and into new markets and find those new audiences?
Well, I don't know if we need to do anything other than what we're doing and kind of stay on that pace. When opportunities arise, springing them, I think, the players have made it clear they want to play in the Olympics. And we saw what the Four Nations tournament did last year in terms of how that exploded. Yeah, I think that's only going to continue to get exponentially bigger. And I think we're getting better in how we do business. I think, we're smarter than we were, when I got here 17 years ago. We're, way smarter now. And so all those things I think will just build. And, as long as you've got your product out there in a way for people it's easy to consume, and knowing that it is such a good product, I think we're on the right trajectory.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to touch on Columbus in particular there with you, Cameron. I think it's the more you ask people, the more you talk to people, it is such a great hockey market. The players love living there and playing there. We've seen some of the runs that the team's gone on and how engaged the hometown crowd gets there, whether it's a friend of ours like Nashers or, all the people that want to retire in Columbus, stay in Columbus after they're finished playing there. You touched on it. You were there about 17 years ago. How has the hockey market in Columbus grown and evolved since that first kind of stint with the Blue Jackets?
We're at a point now where we don't have enough ice. I know that there's been some discussion about Ohio State maybe adding ice, and we're all for that because we want the game to grow. Our sister company is the Ohio Health Chiller Ice Rinks, and they've done a really nice job. We added a slab of ice a few years ago up at our Lewis Center location, and there's just not enough ice, and we need to continue to grow that. And we also started the Blue Jackets Hockey League, which allows us to take a more firm control on, maximizing the use of the ice, getting as many people out there as possible, and giving kids a clear path to go from learning how to skate to learning to play, et cetera. And between the NHL programs and our programs and the chiller programs, we feel like we're doing a better and better job for that to make it easy because um, it's not like the other U.S. born sports in terms of the way it works. People are like, juniors, what's juniors? Nobody knows what that is, and midget and bantam and all that stuff. It's just like a foreign language to a lot of people. So we're trying to take away the confusion and the barriers to make it easier for people to play. And once they do, it's very well received. I mean, we've been partnering on some street hockey rinks as well here in the market, and we'll continue to look at any opportunity we can to put a stick in a kid's hand and get them familiar with the game. As far as Columbus goes, I mean, this market just keeps growing and growing. I mean, I think it's the major city that's the closest to the most major cities in the US, right? So from a logistical standpoint, you can get anywhere from here, or a lot of places. So, Chicago's 5 hours, Indy's 3 hours, Pittsburgh's 3 hours, Detroit's 3 hours, Cincinnati's two. So there's a lot of businesses that want to be here because of that convenience. In addition to, we've always been an insurance hub. We've always been kind of a pharmaceutical hub, and you've got the university here, and there's all these, there's a lot of colleges and university here that provide great talent for people that want to recruit. And now you've got, Wright Pat Air Force Base, and you're seeing Anduril put their one of their hubs here. And so, the marketplace itself is just organically growing. We think we play a role in that because, 25 years ago, where we sit today, the arena was a condemned state penitentiary. This was an eyesore. And now with Nationwide Insurance's investment in the McDonald's buying the team, now you've got one of the nicest AAA ballparks in the country, and the Crew built a beautiful stadium down the street from us. So the arena district has become the heart of the city, and we like to think that we're the heartbeat that kind of keeps it going.
For sure. And I don't want to say obviously needing more ice is a good problem to have, but it is encouraging to see that the game is just absolutely exploding, right? And more and more people are trying to get into it. I want to kind of touch on like the culture of the organization. So obviously we know culture is such a big part of successful organizations. how would you describe the culture within the Blue Jackets and the differences you've seen over the years that have shaped it into what it is now?
I think there's a ton of difference from the way the organization is here. I can tell you, I worked for the DeVos family in Orlando, and that was a special organization as well. And that started with the DeVos family and how they what their vision was for the team. And I think the McConnells have they're different, but very similar from the standpoint of Mr. Mack was a self-made man, and he wrote a book called The Golden Rule. And we all have cards on our desk that talk about how we want to be every day as a coworker, as a vendor, as a partner, as a working with our season ticket holders, etc. And it does start with that, treat people the way that you would want to be treated, and have a long lens on what we're doing. I mean, because when the team was granted here, it was given to Lamar Hunt, and when that didn't work out, Mr. McConnell stepped up. And that was because he wanted to give back to the city that helped him launch Worthington Industries and make his way in the world. And so it's always been with this lens of giving back to the city. How do we make it a better place to live, work, and play? First and foremost, win a Stanley Cup championship. All oars are in the water towards those things. And if we're gonna provide a world class entertainment experience for our fans and provide back to the community, we have to have employees that want to be here and are having fun. So, if we're doing business with somebody, it should be fun. It should be first class. If we have employees here, and so we believe family first. We want people to go to their kids' games. We don't want them to be here, at all hours of the night. We want there to be a work-life balance, and we want them to have a good time doing it because we think they'll be better employees. They'll provide better service, better sales, etc. And that's a hard balance sometimes, right? Because the work still needs to get done, and you have to take ownership of I'm going to get it done, or ask for help. But we're definitely that's our mindset, and that's how we're positioned, and it's been incredible. Like I said, I'm this is my second time with the team. I was here for 4 years, left for 4, and came back. I hired back our VP of corporate partnerships, our VP of content's a boomerang employee. We just brought another director of corporate partnerships back. I feel like I'm missing a couple, but it's very rare that people leave an organization and come back. And we've had that, partly because I think we've had some good people, and partly because this is a place that when they go other places, they're like, I had it pretty good. Not to say that the other places were bad, but your career advances and the opportunity comes to come back. And so, it's really neat to have that.
I think that's an awesome endorsement of the culture and the family first kind of mentality there. What are some of those characteristics or traits that you look for when hiring people on your teams, Cameron? Are there kind of core things that you look for in every role? Does it change team to team, role to role? What are some of those characteristics you see?
As weird as it might sound, I don't really hire a lot of people anymore. I interview people, but I don't hire. And so the people a level down, or what have you, hire. I think, certainly you want to know that somebody can do the job or believe they can do the job. I think the biggest thing for me is that we're hiring people that know how to own an outcome and take a personal accountability for delivering on that. And I think, the culture everybody gets a trophy has pervaded, society in a way that there's this perception that, you're paid for your time. And there's certainly such a thing as an hourly wage. Our people here are salary, but your a job exists to get a job done, right? And so really want to get people that can be a good teammate, that they want to be here. And so when I'm interviewing people, I spend most of my time trying to make sure that they understand what the role is, and understand why does that excite you, and what do you know about Columbus? What do you know about our culture? What are you looking for in a boss? And it's not necessarily that I'm looking to disqualify them as much as I want them to ask the hard questions. I want you to push us on what it is you need to know, because once you get here, we really want you, like, we don't want there to be any surprises. We want you to be ready to go. And then the other thing I do like to understand is how long do you want to be here? And things happen and people leave, and there's no hard feelings. But we spend anybody that hires is probably going to take at least 6 months to train somebody, and then maybe a year before you're pretty good at your job. So if you leave in a year or two, like, we didn't really get much out of it, and you probably didn't either, to be honest. And so, like to understand, like, we like to be upfront with how long we'd like to see somebody in a role, and we like to understand if you see that aligning with yourself.
No, that
The
sorry,
other
go ahead.
the other thing I talk to our managers, our VPs about, and it's a good reminder for me to remind them is, to talk when we're hiring people, that your career is not a ladder. People tend to think of it as, I'm climbing the rungs of the ladder, but it's really more like a series of steps. There's some of those steps are longer than others. You take a look at your career, and you're talking about, let's say 22 to 65. Let's call it that. A lot of the focus gets on this little window in time, and they're expecting to go up here on the steps in that window. It's not realistic, right? And so, um, we try to spend time talking with people about that, and we spend a lot of time on our planning process, and give people exposure to what their boss has to deal with and the things they have to think about and why they think about it, so that when you take that next step, whether it's here or somewhere else, you're prepared. You know what you're going to have to address. If you're going to be a VP of ticketing, you're going to have to go on sale to the public around this date, and when do you, like, here's what we do and here's why we do it. Now, you might think that's all hooey and you want to do it differently, but the things you have to think about to do it. So we like to use that as a training mechanism. And so, you know, career development isn't all about promotions. It's about growth and making yourself more valuable through knowledge and really perspective and things like that. So we work really hard to try to do that. And I know that it can always be better, but those are things I think that are probably lost when you're going through. And, like, you guys heard my story. I mean, I had a liberal arts degree. I was a U.S. history major, clawed my way to get into an opportunity and got promoted. And there really was no management training program. And we're trying to, we don't have a management training program per se, but we're trying to expose the future leaders to what they're going to have to deal with when they get there. Because then you're better prepared.
Yeah. No, those are all great points. Cameron, this has been awesome. To wrap it up, we always ask what the best piece of career advice you could give to someone looking to get into the hockey industry is.
In the hockey industry. Um, I think, do some research and try to really get a sense for what part of the business you think you'd find most rewarding and why. And that's hard. I mean, I know when I started, I had no idea, but I get a lot of outreach from either friends of friends or cold calls or what have you, from people that are like, I really want to work in sports, or I really want to work in hockey, or I really want to work in hockey operations. Um, I mean, if that's the case, if you really want to work in hockey operations, okay, then the next question becomes, what do you know about it? And what value can you provide? And unfortunately, more so than when I was coming out, I mean, there's thousands of people that are saying the same thing. So how do you differentiate yourself? I had a client here in town whose daughter was really interested in communications, working for a team in communications, but she was in high school. And he said, "Hey, would you take time to meet with her?" And I was like, I mean, okay, but I mean, I'm don't usually talk to high school kids because it's just pretty early. And she brought in a resume with her, and she had already done camps and job shadows with people in different roles. So she knew what she was talking about. And let me tell you, like, she separated herself. She was way ahead of everybody, and she's well past high school now, and I'm pretty sure she's got a job now, and it's a good one. Um, so I think the more you can really try to do some research and understand what you think you'd be passionate about, because to just come here and stick you in any role, you might hate it. Nobody's ever good at anything that they don't like doing. I mean, I shouldn't say never, but that's not usually the case, right? So, when I talk to people, I say, I usually will listen, like, did you do any research on me, on what I do? It's pretty public. did you do any research on the team, or like what does communications do? What does accounting do? I mean, we're a business like any other business, and probably 90% of what we do, or 80% of what we do exists in every company. But then we have like game entertainment. Well, you probably don't have that at an accounting firm.
Yeah.
And then we have, hockey operations. But, even the hockey operations guys, I mean, I'm sure you've had like the equipment trainers on here before, and that's a hard life.
A
I
lot
mean,
of hours.
they've
A lot
got
of
stories and they can write a book, I'm sure, when they're done. And those are memories that, only guys like that will have. But they're sleeping on cots at night and unpacking trucks in the middle of the night, and, dealing with sweaty, disgusting stuff to get the guys ready. So I think, my advice would be do some homework on what it is you think you'd be most interested in, why, talk to some people, use your parents and friends as references, just to try to get a sense for what people do for a living and what their day is like. I mean, my own kids will say, "So dad, like what do you do all day?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a lot of meetings." And they're like, "That sounds really boring." I'm like, "Fair,
can be.
can be, can be." So, that'd be the probably the first step. And then, really ultimately, once you get an opportunity, that becomes your not only an opportunity to get exposed to, whether it's an internship or entry level or a job shadow, that gets you exposed to what people do, but you're making an impression. You're building references for the future, and, you're building more competency, and, and getting experience that you can add value into other places.
Yeah, and I think that's super well said, and I couldn't agree more. It's about finding those things you're passionate about, doing the research. It's crazy. Like, it sounds corny to do your research before an interview. Everybody says it, but so few people do it, right? Those little things can help differentiate or set yourself apart so much. And Cameron, I think there was a ton of valuable insight throughout this. So we really do appreciate your time here. We wish you and the Blue Jackets best of luck the rest of the season, except for when they play the Leafs. My last selfish question for you,
Can I tell you a quick story?
please do.
So I hired a guy in Orlando, like a month in. I remember telling my boss, I'm like, this guy's gonna be really good. Like, he he was from outside the industry. I brought him in. I thought, man, like, he is picking it up quick. And I think he was a little frustrated because it's a nuanced business. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it is a little unique compared to other things. And so a month into the job, I think I had told my boss the week before about how great he was. He came in and he quit, went back to his old job. And I tell people to this day it was the worst hire I ever made. And he still texts with me and calls me and he says, "Do you still tell people I'm the worst hire?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And the reason I say that is he had a young child at home, and it was a lot of game nights and a lot of work and a lot of unknowns. And he was like, "Yeah, I think I'm just going to go back to what I was doing." And I blame that on myself for not really vetting and explaining, making sure he knew what he was getting himself into. So hence some of the things. But I would be remiss if he ever saw this, for him not to get the pump that I still talk about him as the worst hire I ever made.
Yeah, I think that's a great story to hear, and I mean, at the time, it's probably like, "Oh, shoot, we got to backfill, we gotta hire for this guy," but you appreciate the accountability too, right? You rather him being honest up front there and acknowledging it rather than kinda trying to skate by for a couple months like I'm sure people do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, people don't know. A lot of people are conflict adverse. They don't want to face things head on, and that is what it is. You had a
Yeah.
question?
I was just gonna say, I've been to 1 game in Columbus, Cameron, and that cannon scared the shit out of me. Does it ever get you still?
You know, this year we changed the timing before the game because we started doing a cannoneer program. We bring in an honorary person to fire off the cannon. And the very first game, it got me because I forgot that was happening. But in general, you kind of get conditioned to it. I mean, we love it. Opposing teams hate it. Don Waddell says that when he was in Carolina, he hated that damn cannon, but now he loves having it go off.
Can imagine. I can imagine. I think that's an awesome feature of watching a game there in Columbus, and again, just loved the environment and the crowd when I was there. It was probably about 2 years ago now, but a great crowd you guys have in Columbus, a great team you're building, and Cameron, truly appreciate the time here today.
Yeah, yeah. Great talking to you guys. Thanks very much for having me.